Moin, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Not all of Bavaria is Bavarian. What does that mean? Let's get into it. 200-year-old borders is the first part of it. Seems to be like the same in Canada. There's a lot of regional, what would you call it, for lack of a better word, regional pride, regional patriotism. Like British Columbians will take jabs at people from Ontario and vice versa. People from Alberta will take jabs at people in BC. People in BC take jabs at Alberta. People in Alberta might say, people in BC have fun living in, not being able to afford a house and, paying huge high taxes. And then people in BC will have fun having no mountains and oceans and rivers and lakes and living on a flat. Like we take jabs at each other. It's almost like siblings. It's pretty much like siblings growing up and, picking on your siblings, teasing your siblings. So there's probably some similarities to that. I'm sure you guys can relate in Germany between people in Bavaria and vice versa around the other states and whatnot in Germany. Let's get to the video. Rubos, link will be in the description. Let's get it.
Regulars to this channel might already know that I live in Bavaria. Or do I? Well, that depends on who you talk to, because Bavaria can mean different things to different people. If you want the short answer, then I live in the free state of Bavaria, but I do not live in the Bavarian part of Bavaria. The long answer is most of the rest of this video. Most of you know Bavaria as the largest of Germany's 16 states.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I live in...
It's like the German Texas. I'm just making a joke. That was silly.
The northwest corner, actually not very far from Frankfurt, while its southeast corner is at Berchtesgaden in the Alps. And while most German states were created after the Second World War, Bavaria as we know it today is only slightly changed from what it was in 1816. I say slightly changed, but actually between 1816 and 1946, Bavaria controlled an area known as the Lower Palatinate, or more usually simply the Palatinate, which is now part of the modern state of Rhineland-Palatinate. But ignoring the Palatinate, and I'm sorry about that, but I'll make it up to you at a future date, there have only been minor changes to Bavaria's borders in the last 200 years. The history of Bavaria can be traced back to the 6th century, when Garibald I was made Duke of the Bavaria and controlled some...
That's crazy, isn't it? 1500 years ago. Holy. That's a lot of history.
Of the Alps and their foothills, roughly corresponding to what is now southern Bavaria and parts of Austria. As was the norm back in the day, battles were fought and aristocrats married each other, and so borders were constantly changing. At one point, the Duke of Bavaria controlled land as far south as Verona in modern-day Italy. By the 19th century, Bavaria had grown quite far north and had even reached Bamberg.
It really was like Game of Thrones back then. You had your different kingdoms and then your different various heads of state and marriages for political reasons, etc., etc. But that's pretty crazy, though. That's a enormous amount of history in comparison to such a young country like Canada, where our architecture and history, culture, it's just, a lot of differences. It's pretty cool. I want to get over to Germany, man.
Now, the exact history of Bavaria's growth from modest duchy to full-sized kingdom is way too long and complicated for this video, but the important point is that its borders were changing all the time. And so now we have modern Bavaria, which calls itself the Free State of Bavaria. And parts of it have been Bavarian for longer than other parts. Now, at the beginning of the video, I said that I do not live in the Bavarian part of Bavaria. So, what counts as the real Bavaria?
What counts as the real Bavaria, and who decides what counts as the real Bavaria?
Well, modern Bavaria is divided into 7 administrative regions. I live in Lower Franconia, but we also have a Middle Franconia and an Upper Franconia. We also have a Swabia, although actually only half of it, the other half is...
Are you Franconian or Swabian?
in Baden-Württemberg. And then we have the Upper Palatinate, Lower Bavaria and Upper Bavaria. Those last three are what most people have in mind when they talk about Old Bavaria, which of course is the real Bavaria. But these are nice, neat, modern administrative divisions.
Don't be so pedantic. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So between these regions, probably even like between villages and towns, you have people saying, hey, we're better than your like people taking jabs at one another. There's a lot of that. Like, that's just a natural human thing. It's like people from my town that I live in now will take jabs at the next town over. You know, swing our fists at them. Rabble. The rabble.
Old Bavaria in the modern sense only roughly corresponds to what was the electorate of Bavaria towards the end of the 18th century, marked on this map in the darkest blue-grey. To us it seems very weird to see such messy borders, but that's how things were in those days. So, does any of this really matter? Well, I think it shouldn't, but to some people it matters a great deal. For example, the current Minister-President of Bavaria is Markus Söder, who is from Nuremberg, which makes him a Franconian, and that has actually caused some friction. See, for a long time Franconians have felt sidelined by the government in Munich, and so we're very pleased to see a Franconian Minister-President. But in Munich, Söder was regarded as not a real Bavarian, and so had to show that he was committed to Bavaria, which then disappointed the Franconians. I myself have been very harshly criticised in the past for saying that I live in Bavaria instead of Franconia, because no self-respecting Franconian would ever admit to being Bavarian.
Come on. That's funny. All right. No self-respecting Franconia would ever admit to being okay.
Except that
I can relate. No self-respecting British Columbian would admit to being an Albertan. Doesn't quite work the same, I guess. We have the Rocky Mountains separating us from the Albertans, so they don't understand what BC is all about. They envy us. Definitely.
Sometimes they do, especially in these parts that never used to be Franconian. In fact, when this administrative region was first created, it was originally called Lower Franconia and Aschaffenburg. And I live in the and Aschaffenburg part. And so around here, you'll see a lot of Bavarian flags being flown. To the people here, the single most important thing is that they are not Hessian. We are definitely...
What is Hessian again? I can't remember if we talked about that earlier. We're definitely not in Hesse.
Definitely not in Hesse. This is Bavarian Lower Main, and don't you forget it. Thank you for...
Isn't that interesting how the different groups, subgroups, and even within a country like Germany, like what things are going to bring Germans together as a whole, like unite people in, you know, a patriotic, or unite people in just being German, and what's going to unite them in being Bavarian, what's going to unite them in different states within Germany, of the 16 states. And the same thing for Canada. Like, we'll have... But those things are all usually secondary to the... Usually, ultimately, people will come together. People within a country. They're supposed to have a certain pride, national pride. Yeah. Interesting video. Rubos, excellent stuff. And we will see you all on the next one. Make sure to have a wonderful afternoon. Peace out. Tschüss. Auf Wiedersehen.